In today's fast-paced world of application development, responsiveness and scalability are key. That's where asynchronous programming comes into play. And when it comes to .NET development, Entity Framework is the go-to Object-Relational Mapping Framework, also known as ORM. In this video, we'll dive into the world of asynchronous programming with DbContext, an Entity Framework, also known as EF, providing you with code examples and detailed explanations. But before we get started, make sure you have a basic understanding of C# and Entity Framework. Now, let's set up our DbContext, which will serve as the data access layer. Here's a sample DbContext class that inherits from the DbContext base class provided by Entity Framework. It's a simple setup that will allow us to perform asynchronous operations seamlessly as we move forward with the other examples. Now, let's explore the power of asynchronous operations in Entity Framework. When it comes to querying data asynchronously, Entity Framework offers methods like toListAsync or first or default async. These methods allow you to retrieve data from the database without blocking the main thread. Here's an example of how to use them. By using the await keyword, we can asynchronously retrieve a list of customers from the database. Before moving on, I want to make sure it's clear what I mean when I say you can retrieve data from the database without blocking the main thread. Here's how I look at it. I always compare it to a place like McDonald's. At McDonald's, you have the cash register, is the person who takes your order, and then you have the cook, who obviously is making up your food. You have someone else who is cooking your fries, and then you have multiple, what they typically call runners, who are the people gathering all of the meals and putting them together. So this, to me, is a good example of asynchronous work, where the cash register is kind of like the web server. It takes the request. It then has other people do the rest of the work for them. Go and get the fries, go and get this. Meanwhile, the next person in line doesn't need to wait for all of that first person's stuff to complete before they get their food taken and their order taken. So I always like to look at it that way. Just a little something different, in terms of how to explain asynchronous programming with real-world examples. Inserting data asynchronously is just as straightforward as reading the data. With the addSync method, we can add entities to the DbContext, and the saveChangesAsync method persists the changes asynchronously. This ensures that our application remains responsive even during data insertion. It's important to note that if you're familiar with regular Entity Framework, you would simply call the functions add or save changes, whereas in these examples, we're adding the word async to the end to make it asynchronous. Updating data asynchronously is a breeze with Entity Framework. The update method marks the entity as modified, and calling saveChangesAsync saves the changes to the database. All of this happens asynchronously, improving the efficiency of our application. This is actually a good example of what I was talking about in the previous note. There's no update async function, it's just update. However, you still use the saveChangesAsync function to accomplish the actual asynchronous saving. Lastly, let's look at how to delete data asynchronously. Using the remove method, we can mark the entity for deletion, and once again, calling saveChangesAsync handles the deletion asynchronously. This ensures that our application remains performant and responsive. And there you have it. By leveraging the power of DbContext and asynchronous programming in Entity Framework, you can build highly efficient and responsive applications. Just remember to handle exceptions appropriately and dispose of the DbContext instance properly. Asynchronous programming offers numerous benefits, but it's important to consider the potential concurrency issues and thread safety. So go ahead and start experimenting with asynchronous operations in DbContext. and explore the other fantastic features Entity Framework has to offer. Build robust and responsive applications that will impress your users. Thanks for watching. Also, if you wanted to see more information about how we would integrate this into MVC and use it in an actual application, comment down below and let me know, because this video obviously just talks about the simple uses of functions, but we could potentially go into a lot more detail and see how we can actually implement this with a standard MVC form or something along those lines. So comment down below, let me know what you think. Anyways, have a good one. Happy coding.